Hello, hello. This is Professor Hartman talking about some game design stuff in my game Threshold. Threshold, if you're not familiar, is the longest running roleplay required game on the internet. It opened over 30 years ago, and I started development on it 33 years ago. If you are a player of Threshold, welcome. Please use the comments to recruit to your guild, church, etc. See if we can get anyone who watches this to come play with us. Highly recommend. I'll put some links in the text below. But today I'm talking about some combat testing, data, and some analysis. So to give you the context here, about 6 months ago, I had an experienced player say they thought combat was harder. And I thought that was weird since I hadn't changed anything. But I didn't think anything of it, and talked to some other people, and they felt it was the same. And so I was like, okay, no problem. Just, player perception is that way sometimes. And then a few weeks ago, I had another experienced player say the same thing, and specifically say they felt like they were taking more damage. I was like, okay, that's strange. I didn't change anything. But he was very insistent. And so I thought, I haven't done a super deep dive into combat in a while. Maybe it's a good time to take a look and see if anything weird's happening. So I came up with some tests, and I had an offense test and a defense test. And my offense test, I made a copy of the live game, and I took a copy from January 1st, 2025. And on both of them, I made 10 characters, male human farmers, didn't even give them a guild. I wanted to eliminate as many variables as possible. I had them fight a level 34 Thracian West Beach blob, but I deleted its special attack so it wouldn't unwield me. And then I did 1,000 fights. The level 30 version, 30 in all stats, 60 in all skills. The level 40 version, 40 in all stats, 80 in all skills. And the level 50 version, 50 in all stats and 100 in all skills. And so that was that test. And these were the results. These are all 1,000 fights. This is the time it took for the player to win the fight. And for the most part, it was very consistent. This data didn't surprise me. Very consistent over time, which, 1,000 fights, that's a very large sample size. So it kind of made sense that it equaled out. And it was, even at level 40, it was pretty solid, and even at level 50. Now, when I dug deeper, though, I did notice there were some things that weren't necessarily ideal. Like, if I look around, here's one, fight 241, 242. This was 377 seconds, and then the very next one was 166 seconds. That's 211 seconds difference. That's quite a difference. So I thought, yikes. Now, at first, that kind of freaked me out, and I was like, man, I don't know if I like that. But I'll get into some reasons why maybe there's I go back and forth on this. The defense one especially. There's times where I feel like the variance is too much and too crazy. And then I think about it some more, and I'm like, well, maybe it's okay. Maybe the variance actually adds some drama and some excitement. So let's look at the defense. Let me show you what the defense test was first. Now I just took the 10 characters. I gave them 100 million hit points. I decided the blob might be different, especially if I'm testing damage over a long period of time. So I made a very basic level 40 orc. And I just let every fight run. 10 fights run for 10 hours each. So in total, that's 100 hours like this, 100 hours here. So 600 hours total of testing. And just to see how much damage they took. And the total damage taken, that data is here. And once again, the aggregated data didn't concern me even slightly. Like a 5% variance, totally normal. 1% variance, 4 or 5% in the other direction, completely sane. That data didn't worry me at all. But I will say, you dig a little deeper. But keep in mind, these are 10-hour chunks. So I would have thought that was enough to kind of round out any strange differences. But apparently not. If you look at some of these, like the player who took the most damage versus the player who took the least, the difference is pretty huge. This one is in particular, this is the same exact stats player, same exact stats enemy, 10 hours, and one player takes 100,000 more damage. Like this guy is mauling. This guy's smashing his keyboard. She took 52% more damage. And I think the problem could really easily be, what if you play the game, one day, 10 hours, say Tuesday, Thursday, you grind for 5 hours, and then the next week you grind for 5 hours and you get this. It is going to be very hard to explain to this player that you did not nerf anything. And this person's going to be very confident in their belief, the game, that they've been nerfed. But even worse, I mean, look at how some of them, even in a row, what if this was your experience for a couple of months, or 10 hours is a lot of grinding. For some people, 10 hours is a week of grinding. This could be 3 weeks in a row. This could be all the grinding they did in a month. And then the next month they get this. That's going to be a pretty huge, that's a very different experience. Let's put it that way. Now, what's interesting is over 100 hours, fortunately, it would balance out. 2.9 million, 2.8, 2.3, 2.3, 1.6, 1.6. Not bad. It really balanced out over 100 hours. So that's something I'm happy about. Look at the difference is really small there. So that's where we're at. A game dev colleague of mine, Raf Koster, has something he says about this where he says, players don't like randomness. They like the appearance of randomness. They actually like consistency. And I think that's really true. I think that when we play games, we don't really love true randomness. We want the appearance of randomness. If we flip a coin 10 times in a video game, we really want it to come up heads 5 times. If it's 6 times, okay. If it's 7, we're freaking out. If it's 8, this game is broken. So that's kind of how players are, and myself too. That's why you get things like in Baldur's Gate 3, they had a feature that I believe is on by default called Karmic Dice. And it eliminates the true randomness and makes things a little more sane. I think it does things like make sure you get at least 120 every 20 rolls and at least 1-1. I think it does a few things like that to try to make it behave the way you'd expect versus true RNG. And won't let you get 3 1s in a row or weird stuff like that. But I think that's why. So I can see why, people might feel a certain way. I've gotten, since we had a dev chat the other night, I had 2 more people contact me and say, hey, I think combat's harder. But what's funny is I've now had people who think it's harder now than it was a few months ago. I had someone say it's harder now than it was a few weeks ago. And I had someone say it's harder now than it was right before the reboot. So what's really interesting is that the people who think they're taking more damage, none of them have the same time comparison, which is honestly unsurprising because it's really just going to be when you got your bad streak. Whenever you got your bad streak is when you're going to think combat was harder, and you're going to really feel like, oh, game's been nerfed. The one thing I can definitely say is that the trend of Threshold is in the other direction. We're constantly making players more powerful, and it's deliberate. We really wanted more people in the very high-level game. That's why over the last couple of years, we've added the Acumens, added Acumen events, Acumania, Divine Right, removed player-level loss from death. Everything we're doing development-wise is really moving players the other direction, making advancement a little faster. For a long time, I thought advancement was too slow and too hard, and we've moved it the other way, which has been great because now there's more high-level people, which gives me the ability to make high-level content and actually have people for it. So that's our design goal. Our design goal is making players more powerful, not less powerful. Like I made a video earlier on this exact data, and I was much more negative about it. I'm much more like, oh, woe is me. I got to change it. And then I talked to some more players and got more feedback and thought about it some more. And the thing is, I'm not sure how bad this is. I mean, maybe I need to soften it a little. There's some things about combat that I think are too random. The way armor class is currently populated is probably too much RNG, and it scales kind of crazy. It's not that random under 20. It starts to get pretty dang random at 30, and then the randomness goes up. So I might want to do something there. We'll see. But there are some upsides to the randomness. It means that combat's a little unpredictable. So you can't just AFK and tab out and do something else and think you're going to be absolutely fine. And I think that's good. There's more combats where you're going to have to eat. Even if the combat is easy, every now and then you might get some bad luck and then you're going to have to eat. And that's good because food is an important part of the overall game economy. And in fact, I will say this, a design goal is if you're able to grind XP or coin efficiently without eating, that is a failure. So if you're ever able to do that, that is something we are, if there's anything I would be down to nerf, it's that. I don't really, as a designer, ever want it to be comfortable to grind without eating food, because that food is just an important engine of the economy. There's tons of abilities that go into it. It's just not a good situation if someone wants to grind inefficiently, like just make kind of garbage XP and brain off AFK, that's fine. I don't mind that. I don't mind, let's say if your ideal earning rate is 1 million XP per hour, but you can grind 400,000 XP an hour not eating, that's probably okay. But I definitely don't want it to be good XP or anywhere near efficient XP if you don't have to eat. That's an important part of the game. So so this does add a little bit of excitement. It does add a little drama. Now, if you are, not letting yourself, fall prey to some of these fallacies, I put them up here. I'm going to write an article, I think, about this. I've done all since I've made the effort to research all these. If you fall prey to some of these where you focus on, like negativity bias, players feel losses more intensely than gains. A 5% nerf feels more devastating than a 5% buff feels good. Or like loss aversion, players feel bad about losses more than they feel good about gains. So in that case, the fights that are, like this, where you take a lot of damage, they really, really upset you. And the fights where you didn't take any, if you're not really thinking about it, then you're going to ignore those and be like, oh yeah, whatever, that was a normal combat. So, but if you're more aware of what's going on, you might be like, oh sweet, that was a great combat. I didn't have to eat at all, or I only had to eat 1 banquet when normally you eat 2, and, be excited about those. Then I think it's healthy. So I'm not sure, as far as this video, I think the interesting thing about this video is to see just how the data comes out, to see the testing process. I'm probably going to share this with my students so they can see something about what real life game design is like, and crunching numbers and analyze your own system. And also just how you can, even on your own system, you can go back and forth. When I first generated the data, I felt great. I was like, oh, look at this. It's totally fine. And look at this, totally fine. Then I dug a little deeper and I found some of the examples and I started to freak out a little bit. But then I was like, I don't know, on the other hand, it does equal out eventually. So it is ultimately fair, and it adds some drama and some excitement to combat. It adds a little bit of unpredictability, a little bit of danger too, because especially on Threshold, a game that's that old, people don't die that often. And people used to be dying constantly, and now there's so many things have been solved, they don't die as often. And to a certain extent, that's a bummer, because dying every now and then makes the game more exciting, I think. But so that's where we are with this. I hope if you're not a player of Threshold, I hope you found the game design aspects of this interesting. If you are a player of Threshold, I hope you enjoyed this very rare window into our game mechanics. As you know, if you play Threshold, I do not like to go into game mechanics that often. I think it spoils some of the mystery of the game. And so if I didn't think this was important enough to talk about, I wouldn't have exposed this much of Threshold's inner workings. But I do think it's important. There were enough people that were worried about it, and I guess now we're back to the general concept for students or people who care about game design who are on my channel. When you have players in your community starting to think something that is not statistically accurate, or you think is not statistically accurate, there are 2 things you need to keep in mind. 1, never be so certain of yourself that you don't at least take a look. I have 35 years game design experience, but it only took a couple of players saying something. It only took 1 player when I first looked at it, but it only took a couple of players saying something before I gave this a serious look. So, your players' experiences are really valuable. Players are extremely good pattern matching, pattern recognizing individuals. And so when they notice something, it's worth giving it a look. But at the same time, to players, keep in mind that if you're a player, you are prone to these. So be aware of these, because you're a human being. Because you're a human being, you are prone to these biases, and they can really affect the way you perceive things in a game. So be very careful about that. And then let's see. And then developers, really think about your data. Like, your data is going to make you think one thing and then make you think another thing. And you should let it percolate in your head, because if you make if I just made a snap decision and nerfed stuff or buffed things or changed the combat formula right away, I might have made the game worse. Whereas I think now I'm probably going to leave this alone until I get into like a big combat rework, in which case, who knows what I'll do then. There might be other more interesting ways to introduce exciting danger rather than this. We'll see. But that's it. That's the combat testing analysis from this data on Threshold. Once again, if you have never played Threshold, Threshold is the longest running roleplay required game on the internet. We are actually having a real renaissance of our game. 2024 was the best year in the history of the game, and then 2025 absolutely crushed it. So we have more people playing than ever. We have more roleplay going on than ever, and the game itself is deeper and just has more development and features coming than ever. So check it out. If it's complicated and overwhelms you, just send us an email and we'll set you up with a mentor or somebody who can help walk you through the game. And the community is extremely helpful and excited to get new players. So please check it out. Thanks for watching.